I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Griffin, would you lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. Needham,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mrs. Levy,
Here.
Mrs. Norian,
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Here.
Mrs. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Darian,
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here. We'll open to the public for agenda items only at this time. If you are joining us through Zoom, please raise your digital hand. Okay, not seeing any, we'll move forward at this time. We'll move to the interim superintendent's report. Business administrator's report.
Okay, so tonight my report's going to consist of presenting to you all the tentative 21-22 school year budget. So I'm going to try to attempt to share my screen now.
You're supposed to see it on our screen.
You can.
She's putting it up as a- Oh, there it goes.
Okay, so hopefully the people at home also will be able to see the presentation as I go through it.
It's a full screen, John.
So once again, like I said, my name is John Lamora. I'm actually reporting as the school business administrator, not the board secretary right now. And I'm going to be presenting the 21-22 tentative school budget. So just a brief synopsis of how we're going to go through and proceed with the presentation. I'm going to go through the budget development process quickly and then talk about the estimated revenues and expenditures and how we came up with them. We'll talk about what's on tonight's agenda, which is the 21-22 tentative budget resolution, and then also the tax impact and what the next steps will be. Oh, it's on, okay. Yeah.
Please stand by. We are experiencing technical difficulties.
Okay, thank you, Rami. Okay, thank you. So to start off, we're going to just start off with the budget calendar, which is an important process. To start the budget, it is actually mandated by CUSAC, so we would get points for this if we were going through the CUSAC process, which we're not this year. They actually waived it. But what the budget calendar does is it sets the tone and it sets expectations for the staff, for the board, on where we want to go with the budget. So the budget isn't something that just starts in the middle of March. It actually starts fairly early in the school year. So in November, I distributed the budget calendar to the finance committee and with the appropriate staff. And as you could read through, there's all different checkpoints just to keep us all on track as we go through and start developing the budget, meeting with the finance committee, meeting with various stakeholders, administration and staff. Okay, and as we continue through January to where we are right now, we just keep refining and tweaking the budget. One of the more important dates to highlight is the governor's budget address is when we get our state aid figures, and then we can really zero in on where we're going to end up when it comes to our budget. And that leads us to tonight. So with the budget process, it's very similar to, balancing a regular budget. You're going to have your cash inflows and outflows. In this case, estimated revenues. So what we try to do is we try to estimate the revenues as closely as we can. The budget is made up primarily of a tax levy, which is received from the town, and then state aid money. And then we try to identify other sources of revenue. And then we try to estimate the expenditures. So these are all the costs that the district incurs. We'll forecast, review past history, get quotes from our current vendors for next year to see where we're going to end up with. And we can calculate also any spending adjustments that we predict for the future. And then we just try to balance the budget as best as we can. We'll determine if there's a surplus or a deficit in the budget. We'll come together with the finance committee, like I said, and different members of the administration, and we'll use our goals and priorities as a district to try to zero in on how to either close the deficit or use the extra money that we have. Usually it's trying to close the deficit though. So like I mentioned before, the first part we can go over right now, it's the revenues. This is the cash inflows, which is largely made up of the local tax levy and state aid. So as you can see, there's a comparison from this year, which is the 2021 column, to next year's 21-22 school year column. The tax levy is going to be increased by around $241,000. Also noted here is the total state aid. So we did receive a nice increase in state aid this year. We went from approximately 503,000 to 628,000. We're keeping the extraordinary aid flat. As you'll see, there's a large decline in the miscellaneous revenues. One thing to note, the reason for this is it's actually twofold. The interest rates have gone down significantly, so we would receive interest each month from our bank accounts, but as rates have gone down, so has the interest, so we've received much less interest. And also, we would rely on renting and usage of facilities to offset some of the budget too. Due to COVID, we haven't been renting the building out, so we're anticipating we're not going to be renting it out as much for the 21-22 school year. So that's why there's such a big drop off. Also worth noting is there's going to be a withdrawal from our current expense of the emergency reserve account. We're going to be using those funds to purchase replacement cameras and door swipes for the access points in the building. And here's a breakdown of the expenditures. So this is an overall picture, and as you can read on the bottom, salaries are inclusive of the regular instruction, special education, student support services, administrative costs, and the facilities. So this is how it breaks down, and this is where the money is going to be going to. As you see with benefits, that's health benefits and other employee benefits. That takes up also a large chunk of the budget. And now we can zero in on the regular instruction costs. So this is one of the bigger challenges that we have to face as a committee. So we have a lot of fixed costs that come along with the budget. As you can see from the graph here, between the salaries and the benefits, that makes up approximately 92% of our regular instruction. It doesn't leave a lot for pens and pencil supplies and things like that that everyone usually would associate with the school budget. So we try our best to manage those costs and either go out for better pricing, use state contract pricing to get better deals so that we can afford more to offset the fixed costs that we have. And now to zero in on the special education costs, similar to regular education, salaries and benefits take up quite a large chunk of the budget here. Also, you'll notice in the red section, this is our out-of-district tuitions. So this is for students that are in out-of-district placements. It could be quite costly, so that takes up quite a bit of the budget too. So between the salaries, benefits, and then out-of-district placements, that's approximately 83% of the special education budget. So like I said, that just leaves little wiggle room for us to try to find other ways to put additional items into the budget. So this is the tentative budget resolution that we're going to be voting on tonight. As you can see, the general fund, which is where all of our operating expenses come from, that's approximately $13.6 million. Also noted here is the special revenue fund. So this is funds that we don't have to use any tax money to offset. It's your local grants, donations, like our IDE grant that we get and our SF funds that we receive. And then also debt service fund, which is for prior debt that we had incurred for capital projects, which I believe is coming off in about 4 or 5 years. It should be falling off. So that brings our total budget to approximately $14.376 million. And the way that we're going to fund most of that is through our tax levy. So on the bottom, as you can see, 12.3 million, if you remember from the revenue side that we discussed, that's our tax levy that's going to be used to offset the budget. And then the debt service fund is also taken from tax levy. So the total taxes is going to be $12.819 million. And now here's a tax impact on how it's going to affect the average taxpayer in Oradell. So the area to really pay attention to would be the bottom section. So in the bold italics area, the average home in Oradell has actually gone up in price. So the assessment of the average home has gone from approximately 561,000 to 567,000. So an actual increase in the assessment to about $6,000. So the tax levy on the average assessed home is going to be increasing approximately $87 per year. So right now, the budget process isn't over yet. There are next steps that we have to follow through with. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be adopting the tentative budget. So once we adopt this, we can submit it to the state and the county levels for them to review. And once they give the okay, we can advertise the budget in the local newspaper. After that, we're going to have another budget hearing where we'll have another budget presentation, which can be anytime between April 24th and May 7th of this year. Following that, the user-friendly budget is posted to the district website within 48 hours of being adopted by the board. and then we'll certify the tax levy with the Borough Hall. So that's my presentation. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's helped out with this. This is a team effort. So from the administration and staff and the finance committee, Mrs. Longo, Mrs. Bozius, thank you for your help with this. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free.
Yes, Mr. Marmora,
Mhm.
on your revenue slide, these aren't numbered, so I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, slide 6. Or it just says revenues.
Yes.
Can you put that up on the screen?
Yeah.
Up. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So in regards to state aid, what we receive from the state, it's nice to see that there's a 24 or 25% increase in the aid that we've been getting over last year. But in terms of our overall budget, the 628,000 we get from the state is only about 5% of our total operating budget of 12.3 million. So while a 25% increase is great, it's only 5% of our total budget. So
True.
95% of our budget comes from local sources. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I just want to clarify. If you include extraordinary aid, 5%, it increases to about 5.6, but it's still basically the same.
Yep, that state aid increase is just isolated from one year to the next for state aid. So from this current year, the 2021 to 21-22 school year, we just saw the increase there. But like you said, it's relatively small in comparison to our overall budget.
Any other questions? Mrs. Levy?
Thank you. Mr. Moore, have you heard anything about potentially getting additional federal aid coming down the line now that they're passing legislation? Will that trickle down into this next budget?
Yep, so for federal funds, that actually falls into the special revenue account.
Okay,
So it's not money that would actually offset tax money. It's just money in addition to that we wouldn't be able to receive. And from what we're hearing, yes, we are getting additional federal tax money in the form of the CARES Act. There's going to be round 2 of that coming out.
okay, so that would be added then to the special revenue fund for that year. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does that specified for what we have to use it for? It's specified, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep, it's going to be a little bit different and a little more restrictive.
Any other questions? Anything more on your report?
So also just unrelated, but one thing to note is the financial disclosure forms. You probably received the emails by now. So the state has switched over to a new system. It's a little bit more complicated than it's been in the past. So if anyone's having any issues or any problems, I just did mine on Monday. It was a little bit extra work, but if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. I can help walk you through it.
Thank you. And the Finance Committee wants to thank you for all the meetings you set up with us and all the time you spent with us. We appreciate it. We'll move on to minutes review of February 24th. Any questions or comments, please reach out to Mr. Marmara. Approval of minutes February 10th and January 28th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of February 10th and January 28th.
Second. Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin? Yes. Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, committee reports, administrative items. Mr. Darian, would you take A?
Oh, yes. One moment, Mr. Lamar, can you release the, thank you.
I second the motion.
For the presentation. Where is 1A?
Page 2. A, administrative.
Did you look at the newest, not the tentative agenda, but the second, the agenda we just received?
No, this is the personnel. Okay, I see. All right, administrative items 1A, HIB report for January and February 2021. I'd like to introduce 1A.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Needham,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, buildings and grounds, Mr. Darian.
Yes, we've had no meetings since our last meeting, but we do have one item for facility use. I'd like to introduce items B1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Needham,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, curriculum, Mrs. Norian.
Yes, we really are going to have a curriculum meeting. We originally were trying for today, we tried for tomorrow, but it looks like we have finally agreed upon Monday will be our curriculum meeting. So hopefully everything will come off fine at that point. With that, I'd like to present item C1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Needham,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, finance, Mrs. Shapiro.
No report. I'd like to make a motion to approve items D1 through D7.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
I have a question
Ms.
on
Shapiro?
D5.
Yep.
Is this particular item for a student that we currently support or students that we currently support? Sorry. Yes, we do.
Yep. Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Walker?
I have a question on D3. Approval of the hospital instruction services. Would that take the place of home instruction or is this contracted out?
So from my conversations with Mrs. Sharkey, this is actually for services to replace a current provider right now that's no longer providing the services. So we had to go out and get a new service provider.
So this is solely for hospital instruction, not for home instruction. For example,
It's not home instruction.
so our teachers don't have that availability to opt to do that. It's done by a service, the Educational Services Commission.
Mhm.
Okay. And the other one was on D4, approval of special education services. Who's trained in that? Who does that? Crisis prevention?
So Crisis Prevention Institute is actually the company that does the training. So they're going to be training one of our staff members who in turn will be turnkeying it to the rest of the staff. So they'll be certified as a certified trainer, and then they'll be training our staff.
We're training one person for $4,000?
That's the whole program. Mhm.
How long is the program?
I'm not I'm not sure I could let you know. Yeah. Sure.
Do you know what the program is going to provide? What type of training it is?
Megan, do you?
CPI is used when students are in crisis and you may need to restrain the child, but your first goal is always to de-escalate this child. So every school needs to be trained, all staff members need to be trained. So by training one of our staff members, we're just giving ourselves the ability moving forward to consistently have training.
Is this something new that everyone has to be trained in?
No, we've always had it. We previously used a program called Handle with Care, where we had a staff member who was certified to train and handle with care. Mrs. Sharkey prefers the CPI program, which is not unusual. It focuses more on the de-escalation and less on the physical restraint.
Mrs. Walker?
One last question on D6, the maximum travel expenditure.
That's 7.
D7.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my agenda. The wrong one. A question. We've allotted 40,000, but we only spent $36 this year. So does that mean that we have a balance of $39,964? What do we do with that?
So that's correct. We did only spend $36 so far on travel. When this budget was struck initially, it was before the shutdown. So everything was budgeted according to going to workshops and making trips to conferences. In turn, we've been able to transfer some of these funds out of the travel accounts and into other accounts that we needed to pay for unbudgeted items, for example, cleaning supplies or, additional staffing to clean the school.
So we can do that. We can move that on an item.
Yes, we could transfer between the accounts.
Okay, great. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Needham,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin? Yes. Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I attended the legislative meeting on Saturday. And we had a guest, Senator Van Gopel from Democrat from Monmouth. And a lot of the questions, he's involved with their regionalization. And I was surprised to find that there are regions that are going through the process. In Ocean County, Pinelands Regional, along with Little Egg Harbor, Bass River, and Eaglewood, are meeting with the express reason to regionalize. Also in Monmouth and Mercer County, Roosevelt, East Windsor Regional, Upper Freehold, and Freehold Borough are meeting with the express purpose of regionalizing. There's grants involved. There's also in Salem County, they're meeting, that's the smallest county. They're meeting to regionalize their schools. They have small schools with, I was surprised, they only have 13 students. So these are buildings with, in different towns with a small amount of students. Supposedly there's an article in the Leader, the magazine that we get this month. There were a lot of questions about people, board members wanting their town to look into it. And the meeting was good. I will have more at the next meeting. But it is happening. Nobody in Bergen County. I have a good idea how we can do it, but it's going to take a while. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, thank you. We met this evening and discussed a number of items, and the minutes will be in your packet for the next meeting. Some of the things were the interviews of the resumes received for principals and some staffing. And with that, I'd like to present F1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Thank you. Mrs. Walker?
I have a question on 1B, where it's a leave replacement. Eliza, I don't see it's an effective date of 3/8. Is there a termination date or an end date on that one?
It's at the end of the year, I'm assuming?
Doesn't these,
So shall we put that on there? 6,
No, to the end of the school year or something?
Yeah.
June 25th?
Okay. Thank you. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Needham,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Policy, Mrs. Levy?
We haven't had a meeting, but Mrs. Longo and I have tentatively scheduled to review some of the things that came out and see if we could wait or get another meeting on the schedule. So please determine, we'll let you know if we're going to schedule a meeting with the policy committee members.
Public Relations, Mr. Griffin?
No meeting for public relations. One request for the chair, though. There was a past request to have the goals of the committee written. That would be great if we could do that. And then at that point, we'll resume the public relations meetings.
COVID Task Force, Mr. Griffin?
Yes, we met on 3/10 and talked about procedures to make the teacher observations as safe as possible. Also talked about the impact of COVID on whether or not we were going to go with the standardized testing, expanding in-school time for the kids. Talked about that options, talked about a dashboard for the COVID impact on staff in terms of how it's affecting subs and things. Beta testing a group a full day, and then also about anything that we can do as a school to make sure our staff has access to the vaccines.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open to the public. If you're joining us from Zoom, raise your digital hand. Okay, moving on to old and new business. Ms. Levy?
I have a bit of old and new. I emailed all of you. I'm now just letting you know about the PTA is doing a spring program for families. out on the lawn of the school, hopefully. And it's called OPS Around the World, and they're looking for volunteers. So you out there, if any parents want to volunteer, it's on the website. But also discuss the possibility of if the board wanted to take a country and have a booth, and different board members could be outside and staff it. So if anybody is interested, feel free to contact me and we can talk about how we can do that. The other question I just had that I know, thank you, Mr. Griffin, about the update on the COVID task force. I know that emails went out today to parents and stuff like that. And I just want to emphasize that I think in times like these, as I've said before, the most information we can give the community and our parents, the better. So even if we're thinking about options or what we're doing, I think that a lot of people were, myself included, were surprised that we got changes this week that are happening for next week. I know that some parents are starting to go back to school, and I know that our administration has been working around the clock, and I'm so appreciative of that and of the teachers. But I just wanted to bring to attention that in times like these, any information and any contact that we can give with our community and with our parents is going to not only alleviate the anxiety and stress on our parents, but on our students. And that we should all be taking that into consideration. That's it. Thank you.
Any other old or new business? Mrs. Shapiro?
As I sat down today, I took a pause when I looked at the calendar. It's March 10th. Tomorrow's March 11th. On March 11th last year, the OPS had scheduled for the students doing the musical, the Broadway show Wicked. And in like the day before, we canceled the play out of concern for the community. But if parents wanted to, take the ticket, they could take their child. It was a moment of great stress and anxiety for everybody. We had no idea what was about to happen. And then March 13th was the last day of school as we knew it. What a year it's been. And then in a few weeks, we sat outside. I'm listening to this budget. We sat outside and Mr. Marmora gave the presentation to us in 48 degrees. And we got it done with our winter coats on. And then we decided it was time to go inside in our homes and go to Zoom before other people did. And then we figured out how to get this done inside in this room together, and allowing people to come in through Zoom as well. And I think we're the only board that I know of or governing body that does this. What a year it's been. We survived. We did our best to thrive. And I just look forward to, in a year, looking back and having a whole different reflection. And I'm looking forward to only good things ahead. I think that there's so much going on, but I'm still so proud that we invested in the ionization so that we purify the air in the building for all of the students and the staff. It kills COVID and everything else. We have proper and abundant ventilation. We have a wonderful teaching staff, and we have a cooperative community. So I hope to look ahead for great things in September, and we can sit back and have a very different meeting next year on March 11th. And that's it. I had a sentimental moment. Thank you.
Any other old or new business? Mrs. Walker?
And to piggyback on Mrs. Shapiro's, looking at the board as a whole, I think also one of our big accomplishments was hiring our new superintendent. And just the other day, I read in the paper that Ridgewood hired their existing principal to become the superintendent. And they paid to have a search team work with them to do it. To the compliments of our board, we did it ourselves. So I think that that's something, a big savings as far as the board expenditure goes. The other quick thing I saw in the our newsletter, the New Jersey School Board's newsletter, that statewide testing has been postponed till April 5th. Have we heard anything more? Has it been, because I know New Jersey School Boards is advocating to disband any kind of testing. They feel that due to the whole pandemic this year, that would not be appropriate. So, but we haven't heard anything. Okay. And the last note in here was that we no longer have Chapter 78 as far as health benefits and responsibilities of boards and teachers. And they've instituted a new Chapter 44. And it's supposed to develop with the goal of providing boards of education, school employees, and taxpayers with much needed financial relief from high cost of health insurance benefits. Well, that's still to be determined. And the article goes on to say, the jury is still out on this. And I recently did take my Governor's 4 seminar, webinar, and that also was brought up there, that this is still very much debated as whether it's such a great benefit as it originally was touted to be. So stay tuned for further things, which will impact negotiations, certainly.
I think I want to make a clarification on that. Mr. Marmora, I believe we still have Chapter 78. It's the new plans that came in last summer that are the different withholdings, right?
Mhm.
So we still have Chapter 78, but if new teachers and any existing teachers go on the new plans, it's a different contribution structure.
So it's the new teachers.
Yeah, and we've already pretty much calculated it's not going to help the board. Not going to help the board.
Thank you.
Just wanted to bring up another topic. I'm part of the science committee on the PTA as well, and wanted to remind all the public listening out there, the science workshops are being conducted for the benefit of the students, and the committee has been working hard. The sign up notices went out this week, so if you haven't signed your child up, please do so.
Thank you. Any other old or new business? Mrs. Levy?
We forgot one thing. This past week was Read Across America. And as my fellow board members I know, we usually go in and get to read to the classes. I know Mrs. Walker, Mrs. Norian are always dressed up, and unfortunately this year we couldn't. But I understand that there was some other people reading and trying to make things as normal as can be for the students. And so I'm appreciative that they were able to do that. And disappointed we didn't get to, then hopefully next year we can be back to reading across OPS for Read Across America Week. So thank you to those who filled in on our place this week.
As long as Dr. Seuss survives.
Any other old or new business? Any reason to go into a closed session?
So I move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.